And a very good morning to all of you. This presentation is more about a process rather than a product or a finding yet. It's a process that is ongoing. We're still working on it, as you will understand as I go through the presentation. It's a process of building bridges, essentially. I represent the Public Affairs Center. We specialize in citizen report cards, a means by which citizens can engage meaningfully with structures of governance through this instrument called the report card, which we formalized is a scientific tool. The People's Action for Development is our field partner in this particular activity. They're a field NGO with strong outreach to community organizations. And we are supported by the Affiliated Network for Social Accountability South Asia, which finances and provides conceptual leads for this project. So the whole idea was to develop an instrument which facilitates citizen participation to protect their livelihoods from climate change and other threats. Please note the word livelihoods. Climate change has to be located within a context so that it becomes meaningful to communities. If we're going to talk generically about science of climate change, it may not move them as much as when you relate it to their own livelihoods. And then we want to develop mechanisms whereby communities can meaningfully engage with governance structures and sustainably participate in local environment and livelihood management. Meaningfully engage is another important word in our project. We've done this in the Gulf of Mannar, which is the southernmost extreme of India facing Sri Lanka. It's physically and politically a marginalized region. And in this, we want to examine the triangle between livelihoods, governance, and the environment. What is fashionably called climate change, but has always been a source of risk and fright to people in those areas. And we'll do it through the instrument that we choose to call the Climate Change Scorecard, which is an adaptation of community scorecards, which is an outgrowth of the citizen report cards that we evolved in the 90s. This is the conceptual frame of the project, primarily that we look at climate change, livelihoods, and governance through tools such as participatory rural appraisal, a number of tools I'll talk about soon, parallelly a review of policies and regulations to arrive at a climate change scorecard. The card is scored by communities as well as by agents of governance, that is, people in local government and higher, and that scoring leads to discussion at the district level, which is the disaggregated decision-making level in India. And then this is taken up further to the provincial or state level and then on to the national level, hopefully leading to policy reform. This process has been going on for 2 years, so we're far from ending the chain. We're still on the way. So ultimately, what we hope to encapsulate is this, that the climate change scorecard will become a knowledge product that connects people's experience with scientific evidence to promote meaningful engagement with governance processes and their managers. In other words, with government officials. This is the project area, and if you notice those little orange rings, it means those islands will not be there the next time I come to make a presentation here because of sea level rise. These islands are disappearing. It is that eco-fragile. It straddles two important small oceans, the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. It connects the two, this Gulf. We worked in 117 villages from which we sampled and picked out two major livelihoods, fishing and Palmyra typing, among a whole range of other livelihoods there for specialized attention, but we hope to expand to include all other livelihoods over the next couple of years. The Climate Change Scorecard adapts the community scorecard, and it, as I showed earlier, it provides the platform for policy dialogue. Now, there are 4 basic steps to it, primary steps to it. The inputs have to be through participatory rural exercises, PRA exercises. There is climate data analysis in parallel. We use scientific evidence. We study local livelihood governance via regulations analysis. We get the scoring done by communities as well as by the government. We have an interface meeting, developing local action plans, which are then taken forward to policy discourse. The 4 pillars our whole project stands on. knowledge creation, respecting that communities have knowledge and wisdom equally valid to those that we obtain from scientific sources or from development economies for that matter. Empowerment is critical and central to this process, that this knowledge be shared with communities as well as with scientists, and it flows both ways, and therefore it results in constructive engagement with policymakers. That means people speak on the plane of knowledge to those in power, not pleading, but as equals, and leading to peer learning across all these constituents in this activity. We took 15 out of the 17 villages. These are the numbers that tell you how many people were actually met and were involved in this activity. The regulations analysis was done by a specialist group that looked at the marine coastal area and all the laws that affected it, and they have codified it and it's available to us. There's such a wealth of laws that no one person knew all this until we did this. Okay. There's no dearth of policies already available. So the challenge for us was to activate these policies and make them more relevant to the pressures exerted by climate change. The climate data analysis was obtained. Interestingly enough, we didn't have it in India. We had to ask NASA for it and pay them money to get our own databases. And then we were able to make a few charts of some interest to scientists, but of great value to the local people to reaffirm their own perceptions about climate change and its impacts. Mapping on the activities was done using GPS, and sensitization of public service providers and other stakeholders was done systematically through a set of workshops. This is one set of graphs that we got. I'm just showing you samples. This is of rapidly rising temperatures. It's quite clear that in the past 30, 40 years, temperatures have gone up to untenable levels. These are just surface temperatures, not even sea level temperatures, not even sea temperatures, I mean. The precipitation has steadily dropped. This is a drought-prone area. It's getting worse over the years. It's quite evident now. Some livelihoods gain by this, as is put up there, like the palmyra. Palmyra is a kind of date palm, which is tapped for its toddy and to make molasses, palm molasses. These are the kinds of tools that we used in our participatory rural appraisal exercises. Resource mapping, livelihood matrix, seasonality diagram, climate change matrix, which is something that we evolved afresh for this project, a Venn diagram, a problem tree. As you can see from the pictures, there is a sense of equality about all of this. There are no highers and lowers. There are men, women, children, all of them equally engaged in contributing their own wisdom and knowledge. We must move away from words like perception. This is validated knowledge that they've obtained from their forefathers, and we need to respect it. And we respected them as equals in this process. It's difficult to distinguish here who the facilitators are, who the leaders are, and who the people contributing the information are. This is a sample of one fishing village and some kinds of outputs that they gave with regard to fishing activity alone. Each village generated massive data sheets about all their work. This is about how the fish catch has steadily declined from the 60s and is expected to decline further until 2020. The number of fishers, it's quite evident that nobody wants to be a fisherman in the next 20 years. How the beach land has regressed over time, causing ruin to habitats as well as to fishing harbors. And they've listed out all the problems in fishing. This becomes a template, a primary platform from which we can develop issues to discuss with agents of local government. The regulations policy really threw up a huge range of socio-ecological issues which are complexly intertwined. And on the one hand, the government is very keen to secure this as a biodiversity hotspot. On the other hand, the fishermen view this as their own rights to fish and to live in. So there is conflict on that front too. Besides that, there are any number of other regulations. I have not listed them here for want of time. On the whole, roughly, a fisheries scorecard that communities score on looks somewhat like this. There are welfare schemes, which are schemes designed by the government to give things to communities in distress. There are relief schemes that come into play when disasters are there. Training and capacity development, which is self-explanatory, and technical and technological support. For fishing communities, there are boats and engines and repairs and maintenance and so on. Besides that, we also ask them to respond with regard to how good the agency that deals with any of these schemes is, how good is the grievance redressal mechanism, what alternative livelihoods are available in off-seasons, in bad years, and how prepared are communities and the government to handle a bad year when it does happen, as when the tsunami hit in 2006. Then we score it out of 100. This is an average score that I've taken out of a set of scorecards. It says 49 out of 100. Roughly, it's an efficiency measure. The government is working about half as well as it should with regard to fisheries programs in the area. Similarly, if we were to take up the fate of date palm tappers, the final score is just 27 out of 100, which means they're in a really risky situation. They have no fallback position from the government if their systems fail, and they fail frequently. These are some pictures of how communities have scored. As I emphasized, knowledge sharing is critical. And all these have been explained clearly to communities so that they can score knowledgeably. It's not just that somebody shouts out a number 5 and another one says 6 and so on. There's a lot of discourse before each of these numbers is put on paper finally. And there's strong facilitation that is required. Once these scorecards are done, we need to prepare both sides to dialogue, sensitization workshops at the district level, to appease government officials that they're not going to be threatened by these scorecards. We're coming to have a civil dialogue with you based on some facts and figures that we've obtained. Informal meetings to update the status of project work with the government officials so they're kept in the loop all the time. Media outreach so the media doesn't use this irresponsibly. PRA exercises are done in parallel, and monthly meetings of the field team to keep reviewing the situation so that none of this generates animus of a kind that will bounce back on our work. These are pictures of meetings with the officials. As you can see, people in uniform too turned up here. A lot of important people turned up, took notes, listened very carefully, and ultimately, I want to emphasize that we may use numbers like 49 out of 100 and so on. That's less important than the fact that the process creates space for dialogue. The knowledge generated empowers people to demand for better governance, even when our project is over, because they've already been enlightened. Both sides understand each other's views and woes equally, and various stakeholders come together. In these meetings, for example, it wasn't just government, there are also quasi-government agencies like banks, service providers, even some corporate groups who, say, serviced engines on outboard motors. They came into these dialogues and they found it useful to listen to citizens finally. Sharing of responsibilities and knowledge for a larger good, and ultimately demystifying science and economics. Livelihoods analysis becomes of the people, something that they can own and be happy about, relate it to common wisdom, and then present it to policymakers because they're also ordinary people. Bureaucrats aren't necessarily the most educated people in the world, so they learn a lot from these kind of scoring exercises. What do we want to do in the future? Extend this analysis to many other livelihoods in that area, make it far more comprehensive, perhaps a little more representative, create a collective of these representatives that have been generated by this discussion to take the issues at appropriate levels of governance, take up the issues at appropriate levels of governance for policy dialogue. We are hoping that by December or January, the national minister will come down to this province and this state, which has not been visited by a politician in the last 40 years, I can tell you, to talk to the communities directly, face to face, because we have a knowledge product that the national minister can relate to and that the common people have generated, and that both will equally understand. We will keep renewing the scientific knowledge regularly to refine our understanding of actual climate change impacts and the attributability of these problems that they are facing to climate change and not to something else. And then we want to, of course, do this in more and more places and perhaps in other ecologies also over time. That, in sum, is the story of a process and the climate change scorecard. I'm afraid time does not allow me to give you details of all the scorecards, but I have the full paper. Our full paper does discuss all this, and it's available on the net. Thank you.